A big thanks to Squarespace for sponsoring this week's video.
So 2 weeks ago, I got my hands on the Nikon Z8. I want to show you why I think, for me, it's worth upgrading and why it might also be for you, and it's not what you might think. There's been a lot of hype around the Z8. It's a big update over its predecessors when it comes to features, but what about photography? Megapixels are what most landscape photographers look for, but it shouldn't come down to just this alone. And in this case, it isn't much of an upgrade. And like every other photographer, I can get caught up with dynamic range and pixel counts, but we shouldn't forget that the camera we use is a tool that needs to feel right so that it can become an extension of you and your creativity. So with the Z8, that's where the decision lies. How does it function as a creative tool? The headline stats might not be the reason to upgrade as a landscape photographer, but it's all the other small features that add up to make a worthy addition to my and potentially your camera bag. I'm not sure everyone will agree with my reasons, but as I head out for a shoot here in the Yorkshire Dales, I want to talk about my favourite features of the Z8, but also one or two things that I don't like. Morning everyone, fantastic to see you all again. So blue sky, shorts, and it's 25 degrees at the moment, and that's at 7 o'clock, which is unheard of in Yorkshire. Yep, I am in the Yorkshire Dales, and I've not been here very much, to be honest. And I'm really excited because I'm taking out my Z8. I've had it for a few weeks now, but I should get to get some good photos today, hopefully. And I've also got along with me my Z7, so I'm going to chat about why I've moved to a Z8, but why it might not be the right thing for you to do, and my decision process around it. So let's pack these and go. That was some climb. So I've come to photograph these amazing trees and this amazing limestone pavement. But first, I'm gonna have a little rest, I think. So if you're anything like me, a new camera comes out, you look at the headline figures, and that's usually in megapixels. But nowadays, megapixels don't often increase very much. So you've got to rate a camera on different metrics. And when the Z9 came out, I looked at it and I thought, no, that's just too big. It's not for me. It's not going to work right for me. But then when the Z8 came out, I assessed certain metrics on it and I thought, yeah, that's going to work really well in the workflow that I do. And I want to explain two things. Quickly, I'll explain one of the sides of that. And that is all about the focus, the fact that I'm probably going to be shooting some wildlife with this when I go to Antarctica, and also the video features, which are really, really useful for me. But for most landscape photographers, those things probably aren't going to matter. So then it comes down to the smaller things, the things that make up the change from the Z7 to the Z8. And it's those I want to speak about in this video, because I feel like a lot of people just miss those out. And those little things added up can make such a huge difference. And it may still be not the right camera for you, but I want to try and explain how I go about deciding on whether a camera like the Z8 is the one that I want to start using as my day-to-day camera. Okay, as I said, there's lots of little things that I think make up a camera. And you've got to decide for yourself really whether all those little things make it enough to add to the usability of the camera. And when I say usability, I mean just how is it going to improve your ability to get photos? Is it going to make it quicker to get photos? Have you got certain things with the camera that makes it difficult at the moment to get photos? One of those things on its own probably isn't going to add up to enough, like this flippy screen for me is so important, but just that thing on its own isn't enough. But all these little things, and I think certainly all the little things on the Z8, for me, add up. But this flippy screen is fantastic, and I can get a shot like this. So here I've got this tree here, we've got blue sky, there's no clouds really. Well, at sunset, we've got a few clouds, we might get a little bit of nice light. But I've got this really nice foreground here with these beautiful rocks leading to this tree here. And I've made sure to exposure stack this. It's at 20 mil, so I've just focused in 3 spots. Also, I've taken a few different exposures as well because I just want to test this camera against the Z7. There's no difference. You know, there is a tiny, 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 tiny difference in the dynamic range at ISO 64, but nobody would ever notice it. And I want to sort of prove that because I think people get caught up in numbers like that, like dynamic range and megapixels, when ultimately they're not going to make you better photos. What you've got to do is make those better photos. And to do that, you need an ergonomically sound camera that you're going to fall in love with. Right, let's get this shot. So I've come a little bit closer to the tree now, and what I like to do when I'm trying to find a composition is take my camera off the tripod, really important that, and then just sort of, sometimes I do it with my phone or sometimes I just move around with looking through the viewfinder. I prefer to look through the viewfinder to do this, especially with a wide angle. This is so important. What I really like about this viewfinder, I think it's a similar resolution as the Z7, but it's got the ability to go to 120 Hertz, and you notice that. It's a subtle thing, but it's a bit like if you've had 120 Hertz on your phone. We're going back to one without it, looks a bit druddery, and it's just more like looking through an optical viewfinder really, which I really, really like. Here I'm just trying to move to get this foreground here about right. I don't want to go too far over there, so and then I just want to get the right height for the tree here. And then I think this will look quite nice. The light's catching the rocks so nice at the moment. So I'm going to then put my tripod where it needs to be, and hopefully we'll get a good shot. And then I'm going to, when the sun goes down a little bit more, I think I'm going to try and shoot a little bit more into the sun. There's some nice layers over there as well. And there's some clouds that hopefully, fingers crossed, should catch the sun later. Right, I'm going to set up my tripod here. So I feel like this is the best angle. The sun's just off to the right, it's casting some nice light on the rocks here and the side of the tree. There's a little bit of layer in the background, there's a nice bit of cloud, but I just wish that the sun's sort of off here, and I wish it was a bit further around here. So obviously in the winter, that would be a little bit better. So note down, come back in the winter. You know, one of the other things that's good about this, and again, it's not enough just to buy the camera, but it's just the speed of operation. Things are quick, it switches on really quickly. Even with the sensor shield on, it switches on really quickly, and I'll talk about the sensor shield later. But it's just faster to focus, you know, focuses better in low light. It's just those little things that add up, and it's those little things that I think add up to more than a big thing like just a few more megapixels. Right, I'm gonna get this shot, and then I'm gonna move closer and go wider angle, I think, so I can get the sun in. I just need to connect the sun and the tree a little bit. I've just been stuck with this one tree this whole time, but yeah, that's fine, isn't it? I've moved around now, the sun's got a little bit lower, a little bit warmer. It's quite a glowy sun, which sometimes is good, but sometimes isn't so good because it doesn't light up the foreground quite as much. but it's still really nice. And interestingly, I've just been shooting my Z7 and my Z8 next to each other, just so I can try and get a feel for what difference it feels like when I'm shooting them both at the same time. And I mean, there's not going to be much difference in image quality, if any. The main difference is, like I say, usability. And I just tried to, when I focus stack, I tap the screen to focus. I tap middle, top and bottom. And I just did it with both cameras, and this struggled a little bit at the bottom when I was at the lower exposure. So that was a difference I noticed straight away. The speed of it's a little bit slower, but again, small things make potentially a big decision, I suppose. And I feel like it's definitely an improvement overall. This shot I think is going to be okay. I think it's going to work. The sun I've got closer to the tree now, so it's just a case of, I've got a wide angle lens on my 14 to 30. I've got the cloud on the left, that hill and the wall and the sheep on the right, the tree and the sun, and then these rocks just catching a little bit of light. I think it looks pretty good. Fingers crossed. Right, and now we're just going to wait for the sun to go down and then probably just get some of the light as the sun's gone completely, and just get sort of this blue sky, and it'll actually be quite nice blue hour light, I think. So one of the things that I've been doing a lot on the shoot this evening is switching lenses, because I wanted to get the same lens on my Z7 and Z8 for just comparing some of the shots. And that's where the sensor shield, this amazing feature, comes into its own on the Z8. Because it hasn't got a shutter, then they've used that space, I presume, to put in a sensor shield, which basically you can switch on when you take the lens off. And I think that's going to be fantastic, and means that you don't have to buy as many sensor brushes or sensor swabs. But if you do struggle with sensor swabs, then check the link in the description below, because my son runs his own camera cleaning equipment. In fact, he's not going to like this video at all, is he? He's got some really good deals at the moment, I know, on sensor brushes and swabs. Okay, on to some of the other little things and some of the things I don't like about the camera. So there's lots of little things that I've not talked about. The button layout, I feel like is just better. You've got more options for function buttons on that, so it just means you can be more creative. The layout of things when you turn it into landscape and portrait are just nicer. It's got things like astro mode for focus. So there's lots and lots of little things. The main thing that I don't like, and it is really a thing that I don't like, is the weight and size. You can see it is a lot bigger than the Z7, and it's probably about 250 grams heavier, something like that. And I don't like that, because I've got a sore back and I don't want to carry more stuff. I would say though, now I've got used to it, I quite like holding it. I feel like it's nicer to hold, so I like that part of it. And then the other thing that, it's not something I don't like, but it's definitely a headline feature that I think people get focused on that doesn't matter. The dynamic range for the Z8 isn't as good as the Z7. It's slightly less at an ISO of around 64 to around about 200, maybe 400. But we're talking like 0.2 of a stop. And I've tried as hard as I can, and I can't. I've taken so many test pictures to see if I can see the difference, because I really care about dynamic range. But you can't tell the difference. And that's something that I don't think we should worry about. People quite often get caught up in those tiny negative headlines rather than concentrating in those tiny positive headlines that in this case it's got a lot. And again, I'm a Nikon ambassador, so you can treat this with whatever credibility you want to give it. But I'd always tell you what I think. I'm not going to be shooting this camera, and I wouldn't shoot Nikon unless I really loved it, because it's my job. And I think that this is a good camera for me to upgrade to. And I hope this video is being useful for you to think about any camera you're thinking to change into, and go and get your hands on it, getting the usability of it, because that is what's going to increase your creativity. Well, what a fantastic evening. It's not quite turned out as I thought it was going to be, but I've really enjoyed shooting this tree with the Z8. And if you want your website to turn out how it should, unlike this evening's weather, then make sure you check out Squarespace, because I've said it so many times before, but they really are a fantastic platform for building your own website. You can set up your domain, and then if you want to set up a store, you can easily do that. There's loads of templates, and they've got 24/7 service. I've used Squarespace for 6 years now, and they've just been fantastic, made everything super easy for me. So if you want to check out Squarespace, then you get 10% off with the offer code Nigel, or use squarespace.com/Nigel. Right, I think I'm going to head down now because I'm going to get up first thing tomorrow morning, which I think's in about five hours. Great.